Hello everybody, this is Graeme Anderson, and today I'm going to be looking at magnificent flying machines. Now, I've always been interested in the early days of aviation and the crazy races they used to do in the early 1900s to kind of get people used to the airplanes. So this game piqued my interest. Each person will represent a different country with a different style of aircraft to try and be the first pilot to cross the finish line, but being first may not win you the game. You need to be picking up passengers and cargo and dropping them off at the appropriate places to gain points at the end of the game. Now, you're going to be rolling dice to see whether you can do the different things, like taking off, flying, and landing, all the while using your special abilities and the cards in your hand to help you. Now, of course, the cards in your hand can also be used to hinder other players' progress. So this game's main mechanisms are dice rolling and some take that, and that may not be my favorite styles, but if done well, can be fun. So did this game turn out to be an exciting nail-biter finish of a game? Or did it just stumble out of the blocks? Let's get it to the table, see how it's played, and we'll come back with my final thoughts on magnificent flying machines. Here's magnificent flying machine set up for 3 players. The board is set up with 3 airfields, where you start, a midpoint, and where the race ends. Next, take a random mountain, town, and water and field track, place the passenger, special cargo, and regular cargo tiles on the tiles based on what type they are and how many players there are. You'll also leave 3 mountain and 3 water special cargo tiles aside. Shuffle all the weather tiles and place 1 on each tile after the starting airfield. Place a first to land victory point token based on the number of players. And in the middle airfield and final airfield, add the relevant race stage points based on the player count. Roll a die to determine first player, then deal out 6 pilot cards. Starting with the person in last player order, each player will choose a pilot card. Next, do the same thing with the flying machines. Take the matching standee and add your colored base to it, and it starts on the starting airfield. Place 4 cubes of your color on the fuel gauges. Deal out 6 special equipment cards and do 2 rounds of players picking which special equipment they want, and each time a player takes a card, replace it so there's always 6 cards to pick from. If players still have empty slots, continue until all players have filled their slots on the flying machines, and then leave 6 face-up cards for the rest of the game. For any pilots and special ability cards that modify the ability scores, take an appropriate marker to remind you of that ability. Finally, give each player 1 passenger, and 2 takeoff, 2 flying, and 2 landing spare parts. Shuffle the 3 water and mountain special cargo tiles that were set aside earlier and randomly give 1 to each player. Each player decides which of these to carry. Passengers take up 2 internal cargo spots, and cargo can be held in internal or external cargo slots, but can never be placed in a passenger slot. Spare parts can be carried in internal or external storage slots, and sometimes on the pilot, special equipment, or boost cards. Now you're ready to play. This is a race game, so all the pilots are trying to get from the start to the finish as quickly as possible, while gathering points along the way from passengers and cargo delivery. At the end of the game, the player who has made it to the end, and it might be that not all planes make it to the final space, and has the most points, will be the winner. A player turn is made up of taking 2 actions. They can be repair your craft, take off, fly, land, before a trick maneuver, or gain altitude. For most of the game, you'll be doing the takeoff, fly, and land action, which all requires tests, so let's have a quick look at those. Whenever you're doing a test, you look at the number of symbols for that action printed on the tile, and add them to the symbols on the weather tile. Take as many dice as the action symbol showing on your flying machine board. Roll the dice, and see if you get enough symbols to perform this action by comparing how many you rolled versus what the action requires based on the terrain type and the weather. If you do not pass, you can discard spare parts or cards matching those symbols that you need until you get enough symbols to pass. If you manage to pass the test, then you perform the action. If you fail, there could be a consequence for that, but if you fail and rolled 1 or more catastrophic failure symbols, then you will suffer some damage depending on the action you are attempting. You can also always pass the takeoff or flying action by spending 2 fuel from your fuel gauge. Let's have a quick look at the cards. Each player starts with a minimum of 3 cards. These are either trick or boost cards. Trick cards are used to impede other players, while boost cards will be helping you. Each card will have some text as to what it does, and will have a symbol at the bottom, either a spare part to help you to pass the test, or a CAD symbol, which can be played when someone else is taking a test and will require them to roll 1 less die. A trick card can be played on anyone's turn, but a boost card can only be played on your own turn. When playing a card, you must decide which section are you using, either the text or the symbol. Either way, each card can only be used once, and then it's going to be discarded. Besides takeoff, flying, or landing, the other actions are repair and scavenge, which allows you to repair some of the damage on your machine, refuel, and get some spare parts. You can also perform a trick maneuver, which is essentially a flying test. You don't move your machine, but you get 2 points if you're successful in doing the trick maneuver. The last action is to gain altitude, which will move your machine up to the top of the tile. This does not require a roll. While up there, your machine is not affected by the weather tile. And taking a flying test, you can move down 1 or 2 levels to gain 1 or 2 flying symbols to help you pass a flying test. If you are unable to successfully do any of these actions, that is, you fail to move, score points, take on cargo or passengers, or finish at a higher altitude, you can take a luck token. On a subsequent test, returning the luck token will change a failure into a success. Now, any damage you take during your actions requires you to put some damage tokens on your fuel gauge, and if the fuel gauge is full of damage tokens, place them on your scoring area. Anytime damage is repaired, move it to your scoring area. When you've landed on a non-airfield space, you will take the first to land scoring token if it's still available, and you can drop off and pick up cargo or passengers. The special cargo must be dropped off in the same terrain that it matches. Once delivered, you move the special cargo into your scoring area. General cargo, which is only collected during the second half of the race, can only be delivered to the final airstrip. If you are on the ground and there's cargo, you can pick it up. Now for passengers, they will want to go to a city or an airfield tile. If you land on one of these tiles, move your passenger to your scoring area. You can pick up new passengers around the ground as well, but you are limited to picking up 2 passengers and or cargo during a single turn. You must also make sure that they're going into the correct spots. Remember, passengers go in internal areas and cargo can go in internal or external. When you land at the middle airfield, you can discard a piece of equipment you currently have and pick up one of the face-up ones and adjust your player board based on the discarded card and the new card. At the end of a player's turn, they will pick up 1 card from the deck and add it to their hand. If they are over their hand limit, which is usually 3, they must discard cards. And after each player has performed their 2 actions, the round is over. The first player will flip over a weather card, and most of them will affect the weather in some way, either on a specific terrain type or an all-terrain, and you're either going to be shifting or replacing the weather tiles as indicated on the card. When a player lands on the final airfield, this triggers the end of the game. In a 3 to 4 player game, when the penultimate machine lands, the last player has 1 more turn to land on the final airfield. The previously landed players can still play cards as normal and can perform some special actions to either get rid of damage markers or score points. If the final player cannot land, they will not be able to score their points. For all the landed players, they add up all their points from their scoring area, from delivering cargo and passengers, for first to land tokens, and any other tokens they've picked up during the game. But they will lose 1 point for each damage marker on their player board, either on their fuel gauge or in their scoring area. The player with the most points is the winner. Now let's get back to see what I thought about the magnificent flying machines. So, theme and components. I thought the theme was actually well done and fun. You're doing exactly what I was expecting from this type of game. Attempting to take off, fly, and land. Pick up passengers who are excited by the new aircraft and still trying to win the race, while of course your opponents are trying to sabotage your efforts. So, theme is well done, and I like the theme. On to the components. They are plentiful. There are loads of chits for everything, and they're all of good quality. The cards are also plentiful and good quality, and the art's nice on these, very cartoony. The boards are mostly big enough to hold the standees, for the most part. When playing a larger game, having all the planes in one section can get a little tight. And the rules are laid out well, but I'll talk a bit more about the rules later on. And I did like that there were some good player aids as well. So, on to the gameplay. The concept of the game is pretty straightforward. Roll some dice to see what you achieve by playing good cards on yourself and bad cards on other players. Sounds simple. But in reality, there's a fair number of little rules you tend to overlook. In the overview, I mentioned that if you pass your first flying test, you can attempt it again, but you lose a die. Or you can always discard 2 fuels to pass a takeoff or flying test. Again, that may not be something that you always remember. Or all the rules for when you pass, fail, or have a catastrophic failure. I can never remember what happened. So I was happy that they did have this cheat sheet with all the things on it. But the game was never felt fast-paced like I was expecting a racing game. It was, okay, I'm going to attempt to take off. Anyone going to play a card or a trick symbol against me? No? Okay, I roll. I didn't make it. Now, do I have any special cards, special pilot abilities, plane abilities, spare parts to aid me? No? Okay, did I roll any catastrophic symbols? No? Okay, so let me pull out the chart. Yeah, this phase is over. I achieved nothing. But at least I get a luck token. And let's talk about the rulebook. This rulebook is 17 pages long. Now, it does have a quick start guide for your first plays and has a few pages at the back for pilot cards and equipment cards. But the rules themselves are 8 to 10 pages long. And for a game that really, at its core, is just a random die roll to see if you achieve something, it feels like this is overkill. The standard setup is 3 pages long. It's almost like this game doesn't know what it wants to be. Does it want to be a nice family weight game with some rolling dice and take that? If so, this needs to be trimmed. Or is this a game trying to be a more gamerly game? If so, the main mechanisms of kind of roll and take that doesn't kind of mesh with that idea. But on to some more positives. There's ample variety in the game. There are 6 planes to choose from, each with a different setup. I think that they're all balanced, but some of them did feel like they were better than others. The one with the rolling more dice was definitely my favorite. Added to that, the pilot cards, and there are 18 of those, along with all the equipment you can start with, makes the setup very different. And sometimes that can be a disadvantage just because of the setup you have, or the setup that someone else has. If you get a plane that allows you to roll lots of dice, with a pilot that gives you extra dice and good equipment, you're kind of set for the game. You can get ahead fairly easily, as it's hard to fail a test. But I also did appreciate that there was a bit of push your luck. One thing I didn't go too much in detail in the walkthrough was for the flying and trick maneuvers. During a phase, if you succeed in one of those, you can attempt it again, but losing a die. Or 2 dice for the trick maneuvers. If you fly on though, you must make sure you have enough fuel to pay for the extra spaces. Again, the fuel payment is outlined on your little player board and your cheat sheet. But if you're falling behind, I do like that there's a way that you can try and burn fuel to try and catch up to the leaders. So you never kind of felt that you were completely out of the race. But I did find that the game didn't scale particularly well. I didn't like the 2-player variant. It's essentially a 4-player game with each player playing 2 machines. And at the higher player counts, we spent way too much time waiting for our turns. The sweet spot for us anyway was about 3 to 4 players. And even at that, the game lasted a good 60-90 minutes. And this is, for me, probably my biggest negative. I did have fun with the game, but for the randomness and the take that elements, it was just too long. We all wanted it to be shorter. But then the cargo and passenger drop-offs needed the extra tiles, so we didn't feel like shortening the airfield was a solution. Again, this game kind of feels kind of stuck in the middle. So would I recommend this game? First and foremost, there is fun to be had with this game, but it's far from perfect. But for the right group of people, that is a group of, I would say, 3 to 4 players that likes randomness and some take that and doesn't mind the longer games, then yes, I would recommend this game. I like the variability of the game. You'll probably never play the same setup twice in a row. I like the luck tokens. If you achieve nothing during the round, which unfortunately does happen a fair bit, having that luck token combined with the push your luck aspect of the game makes it that you can maybe catch up if you're falling behind. And it also means that you're never completely out of the race. Having the spare parts in your vehicle and being able to discard cards from your hand to help mitigate the die rolls was another piece that I enjoyed was in there. But when it comes down to it, this is a luck-based take-that game. Yes, you can have some strategy of picking up and dropping off cargo and passengers and when and where and deciding when to push your luck to try and get ahead of the other people, but it's all kind of beholden to your rolls and the cards you have in your hand. We found that the player who got lucky with their setup tended to be the person that won, not so much because of their great strategy was any better, but they just kind of got lucky and they had maybe lucky rolls. And because of that, to sit through 60 to 90 minutes didn't feel as fun sometimes, especially if you were not that lucky person with the great setup. So overall, I'm going to give this game a 6.5 out of 10. There is fun to be had in this game. But ultimately, I felt it was a bit too long for the basic mechanisms of lucky rolls, card play, and take that. But that's it for the moment. Until next time, thanks for watching.